When we talk about why good people stay in bad relationships, one of the most powerful forces at play is fear, the fear of being alone. And I don't just mean the occasional loneliness we all feel. I'm talking about a deep existential kind of fear that whispers to us in the quiet moments. If I leave, I will be nothing. If I leave, I will be nothing. If I leave, I will have no one. It's a fear that distorts reality, that convinces someone that staying in pain is somehow safer than stepping into freedom. Think about it for a moment. Think about it for a moment. Being alone is not just a physical state. It challenges our identity, our sense of worth, and even our survival instincts. Psychologically, humans are wired for connection. Psychologically, humans are wired for connection. We are social beings, and the idea of isolation triggers a primal anxiety. But here's the thing. Just because something feels dangerous doesn't mean it's actually bad for us. Many good people fall into this trap because they equate being alone with failure. They've been taught explicitly or implicitly that relationships are the measure of a person's success. Friends, family, culture, social media, they all reinforce the idea that if you're single, you're incomplete, you're lacking, you're somehow failing. And so the mind creates a story. If I leave, I lose not just them, but my sense of self, my social standing, my purpose. That story becomes a cage, invisible, yet very real. The irony is that the fear itself is often far worse than the actual experience of being alone. Alone doesn't mean unloved or unworthy. It simply means a pause, a reset, an opportunity to reconnect with who you truly are. But fear, cleverly disguised as caution or loyalty, convinces you that leaving is catastrophic. And here's the subtlety that makes it so powerful. Fear of being alone doesn't exist in isolation. It works hand in hand with hope and memory. You remember the good moments, the flashes of love and connection, and your mind says it wasn't always like this. Maybe it will be like that again. So you stay. You stay because leaving feels like jumping off a cliff into uncertainty. Even if that cliff leads to air, freedom, and self-discovery, fear doesn't just whisper, it shouts, and it often wins when we don't consciously confront it. The truth is, staying out of fear is a form of self-betrayal. It tells you that your comfort, your need for security, is more important than your dignity, your growth, your happiness. And yet, this is where most people get it wrong. They think courage is the absence of fear. No, courage is feeling that fear, feeling the tightness in your chest, the worry about what others will think, the voice in your head saying, what if I fail? And deciding anyway. But if I fail, and deciding anyway. Courage is saying, I would rather risk being alone than risk losing myself in a relationship that diminishes me. When good people finally recognize this, something remarkable happens. Alone stops being an enemy. It becomes a teacher. Solitude becomes a space for reflection, for understanding your desires, your boundaries, your true worth. Fear loses its grip when you realize that being alone is not the opposite of love. It's the preparation for the love you actually deserve. So if you ever feel trapped by the fear of being alone, remember this. The only thing standing between you and the life you deserve is the story you've been telling yourself about loneliness. Step forward. Feel the fear, embrace it, and let it show you the door to freedom. Because the moment you stop running from being alone, you begin running toward yourself, and that, my friends, is the bravest thing you can ever do. Another reason good people stay in bad relationships is one of the most deceptively powerful forces in human psychology. Hope. Hope is beautiful when it inspires us, when it motivates us to reach for better, to grow, to persevere. But in relationships, hope can also become a trap, a lens through which we distort reality, clinging to the illusion that someone will change, that things will get better, that the future can rewrite the past. We tell ourselves, I know they can be different. I know the love is still there. I just need to hold on a little longer. And in the moment, that hope feels noble. It feels patient. It feels loving. But left unchecked, it becomes a powerful reason to stay where we are. Even when we know we shouldn't, think about what hope really does in a relationship. It shifts our focus from the present, the pain, the disrespect, the emotional neglect, to a hypothetical future where the relationship works the way we imagined it should. Every small gesture, every rare moment of kindness becomes evidence that change is possible. Your mind celebrates it, saying, see, they still care. They still love me. I just need to wait. But that's the danger. Hope lulls us into a false sense of progress. It's like standing on a treadmill that's moving backward. Every step feels productive, but you're still going nowhere. Psychologically, this is tied to something called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same principle that makes gambling so addictive. When someone gives you just enough love, just enough attention, just enough affection, your brain becomes conditioned to focus on those rare highs, ignoring the consistent lows. You stay not because the relationship fulfills you, but because hope convinces you that fulfillment is around the corner. That hope becomes a lens through which reality is filtered. And suddenly staying seems not only reasonable, it seems essential. And here's the subtle cruelty of hope. It doesn't ask whether the person is capable of change or whether they even want to change. It only asks that you wait, that you tolerate, that you believe. You hold on because hope whispers. If you leave, you'll lose the possibility of what could have been. The fear of missing out on a better version of the relationship overrides the reality of your current suffering. You start to measure love not by how you feel in the relationship, but by how the potential of love makes you feel in your imagination. The problem is that hope, when misapplied, is a passive force. It asks you to invest your time, your energy, your emotions without requiring the other person to invest and change. It asks you to bear the weight of the relationship alone. And eventually, you realize that hope isn't enough. Hope is not a substitute for respect, consistency, or emotional safety. Hope cannot carry the weight of a pattern that does not honor you. The courageous step is to recognize when hope is holding you hostage rather than inspiring you. To acknowledge that waiting for someone to change is not an act of loyalty. It is a surrender of your own well-being. True hope is not about clinging to someone else's potential. It is about believing in your own potential. It is about trusting that you are worthy of relationships that honor and elevate you, that you are capable of choosing love that is real, consistent, and reciprocal. So if you feel yourself staying in the shadows of what might be, remember this: hope should illuminate your path, not chain you to someone else's unwillingness to grow. Let hope guide you toward yourself, toward the love you truly deserve, and not away from it. Because when you stop waiting for someone else to change, you open the door to the life and love that already honors who you are. Another reason good people remain in relationships that no longer serve them is the invisible weight of emotional investment and history. Think about it. When you've shared years with someone, when your memories are intertwined with theirs, leaving doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like erasing a part of yourself. Every argument you've survived together, every laugh, every intimate moment, every vulnerability shared becomes a thread woven into the fabric of your life. And when you consider leaving, it feels as if you would be tearing that fabric apart, unpicking not just the relationship, but the version of yourself that existed within it. That history, that emotional investment creates an almost magnetic pull that is hard to resist, even when the relationship is clearly unhealthy. This is more than nostalgia, it's psychological commitment. Humans are wired to value what they have invested in. Psychologists call it the sunk cost fallacy. It's the tendency to commit an endeavor simply because we put so much into it, time, energy, love, rather than because it's actually good for us. In relationships, this manifests as a kind of moral and emotional obligation. You feel as if leaving would waste all the emotional labor you've poured into keeping the connection alive. You tell yourself, I've invested so much to make this work. I can't just walk away. But here's the reality. Investment doesn't guarantee a return, and time spent does not justify continued suffering. The challenge is that history and emotional investment create a lens of selective memory. You remember the good moments more vividly than the bad. You tell yourself stories about what the relationship used to be, about the promises that were made, the dreams that were shared, the potential you saw in them, that narrative can overshadow the reality of daily pain, neglect, or incompatibility. And in doing so, it convinces you that leaving would be not just a loss of a person, but a loss of your past, your identity, and your personal history. At a deeper level, this attachment to history reflects something profoundly human: our need for continuity and meaning. We fear that by ending the relationship, we will also have to reinterpret our past, confront our choices, and face the uncomfortable truth that we allowed ourselves to be treated in ways we didn't deserve. It's not just about leaving someone else. It's about reconciling with ourselves and admitting that what we hoped for didn't come to fruition. That confrontation requires courage, self-compassion, and the willingness to redefine our narrative without shame. But here's the paradox. Clinging to emotional investment can prevent the very growth that history is meant to teach us. Memories and experiences are not chains. They are lessons. Every moment, every connection, every heartbreak carries insight if we are willing to reflect rather than cling. Choosing to leave is not erasing history. It's honoring it by learning, integrating, and moving forward with wisdom rather than pain. The courage lies in recognizing that the value of your past does not depend on the future of a flawed relationship. So when you feel the weight of shared history pressing down on you, remember this: your past is a library, not a prison. Every memory, every investment, every shared moment exists to inform the choices you make now, not to trap you in a cycle of suffering. Let your history be a teacher, not a jailer. And let the strength you gain from that awareness guide you to a future where your emotional investment finally meets respect, reciprocity, and real love. Another reason good people stay in relationships that harm them is a deep-rooted sense of self-sacrifice and over-responsibility. Many good-hearted individuals carry within them an innate desire to care, to fix, and to protect. This isn't a flaw. It's a strength when applied wisely. But in the context of an unhealthy relationship, it becomes a trap. You start to feel responsible not only for your own well-being, but for the emotions, choices, and happiness of your partner. You tell yourself, if I just try harder, if I just give more, if I just forgive one more time, everything will be okay. And in that effort, you begin to erase yourself, mistaking endurance for love. At the core, this is about empathy misapplied. Good people are wired to feel others' pain intensely, to respond to it, to want to relieve it. But when that empathy turns into over-responsibility, it creates a dynamic where you're essentially carrying the weight of someone else's emotional world while neglecting your own. You begin to believe that their happiness or even their stability depends on your actions, your patience, your forgiveness. And because you value yourself through your ability to give, you feel compelled to stay, even when staying diminishes your own sense of worth. Philosophically, this reveals a subtle confusion between love and duty. Love should expand us, energize us, and encourage mutual growth. Duty in excess confines us. You start to measure your commitment not by how you feel in the relationship, but by how much you sacrifice, how much you endure, how much you absorb. And when endurance becomes the measure of love, you forget to ask the most important question: am I being respected? Am I being valued? Sacrifice without reciprocity is not noble. It's self-neglect. Psychologically, over-responsibility can also mask fear. There's an unspoken worry that if you stop trying, if you stop fixing, the relationship or the person will collapse. You take it upon yourself to maintain stability, to smooth over conflict, to absorb the consequences of mistakes that are not yours. It's a heavy load, and it's often invisible. Friends, family, even the partner themselves may not recognize it, but internally, it chips away at your energy, your confidence, and your sense of identity. Here's the deeper truth. Real love does not ask you to bear the weight of someone else's life. True connection is not a hierarchy where one person sacrifices endlessly while the other receives. It is a balance, a reciprocal exchange of care, respect, and support. When you recognize that you are not responsible for fixing another person's flaws, you reclaim a freedom that has been quietly eroding. You realize that stepping back is not abandonment. It is self-respect, clarity, and honesty. The courageous act is to acknowledge your own limits, to honor your own needs, and to stop mistaking suffering for love. When you stop carrying the burden of someone else's choices, you free yourself to experience connection on equal terms. You begin to understand that the measure of a relationship is not how much you give at your own expense, but how much mutual respect, growth, and joy it fosters. So when you feel the weight of over-responsibility pressing on your shoulders, remember this: you are not a lifeline to someone else's existence. You are a whole, capable human being deserving of love that uplifts rather than diminishes. Release the burden you were never meant to carry and allow yourself to step into a relationship where giving and receiving are in balance. True love honors both hearts, and it begins with honoring your own. Another reason good people remain in relationships that harm them is a deep-seated struggle with self-worth and the need for external validation. When you don't fully believe in your own value, the human desire to be seen, accepted, and loved can become overpowering. You begin to tolerate behavior that diminishes you, reasoning that if you're needed, wanted, or recognized, even inconsistently, it proves that you matter. And so you stay quietly hoping that the other person's recognition will fill the void inside you that only self-respect can truly fill. At its core, this is about identity. We are conditioned to seek approval from the outside world, to let other people define how good, lovable, or worthy we are. In relationships, this can manifest as a dangerous imbalance. When your sense of value depends on someone else's fluctuating attention or affection, your emotional state becomes hostage to the I they live in, behavior. You start measuring your worth by their words, their actions, and even their absence. And when love is inconsistent, you cling harder, not because the relationship fulfills you, but because their acknowledgement momentarily quiets your inner critic. Psychologically, this is a pattern reinforced early in life. Many people learn to seek validation from caregivers, teachers, or peers, internalizing the belief that love must be earned. Over time, this evolves into an adult relational dynamic where approval, affection, or attention becomes a currency, and staying, even in the face of mistreatment, feels safer than risking the perceived judgment of leaving. You tolerate disrespect because rejection feels worse than disappointment. You forgive repeated offenses because acknowledgement, however fleeting, feels like proof that you matter. But here's the paradox: relying on someone else for validation never makes you whole. No amount of attention or approval can substitute for the quiet, unwavering belief in your own worth. When you measure your value by someone else's behavior, you are building your foundation on sand. The highs feel intoxicating, but the lows, rejection, neglect, criticism, shake you to your core. And yet, good people stay because the intermittent highs feed hope, distracting them from the deeper truth. Their own validation is the only stable source of self-worth. Philosophically, this points to a profound lesson about love and identity. True love does not demand that you prove your worth. It does not hinge on negotiation, performance, or endurance. It recognizes, respects, and celebrates the inherent value of the other person. When you rely on external validation to justify staying, you are not in a relationship, you are in a system of survival. Quietal. They live in negotiating for scraps of acknowledgement to feel seen. The courageous step then is to reclaim your own sense of worth. It is to say, I do not need someone else to define me. I am inherently valuable. I deserve respect, love, and consistency. When you internalize this truth, the fear that once held you captive begins to dissolve. Leaving a harmful relationship is no longer an act of desperation. It is an affirmation of your own dignity and integrity. You no longer tolerate behavior that undermines your value because you recognize that your worth is not contingent on another person's recognition. So, if you find yourself clinging to a relationship out of a need for validation, remember this: the most important love you will ever receive is the one you give yourself. The respect, acceptance, and admiration you seek externally already exist within you. Step into that power, and suddenly leaving isn't a loss, it's liberation. Your self-worth is not something to be negotiated. It is your birthright, and embracing it is the first step toward the love you truly deserve. The final reason good people often remain in relationships that no longer serve them is the weight of social pressure and the influence of identity. We live in a world that constantly tells us how we are supposed to live, love, and behave. From family expectations to cultural norms, from friends' judgments to the subtle messages of society, there is an unspoken script about what a successful relationship looks like, how long it should last, and what it should endure. Good people internalize these messages, believing that leaving a relationship, even an unhealthy one, is a failure or betrayal of their identity or even a moral weakness. The fear of judgment, of standing apart, of being seen as inadequate can be so intense that it keeps them tethered to what diminishes them. This pressure often manifests subtly. Friends may question your choices. Friends may question your choices, asking why you are leaving someone who loves you or why you are giving up too soon. Family may express disappointment or worse, disbelief, implying that ending the relationship will bring shame or disrupt family dynamics. And society at large, with its endless depictions of idealized love, communicates that commitment is proof of virtue, that perseverance equals worthiness. Over time, these external expectations merge with internal doubts, creating a powerful force that convinces you to stay, even when you know your happiness and well-being are at stake. At its core, this is about identity. Many good people define themselves through their relationships, believing that being a partner, a caretaker, or a loyal person is the ultimate measure of who they are. They tie their value to endurance, to selflessness, to the maintenance of appearances. And when they begin to question a relationship, that questioning feels like questioning themselves. If I leave, who am I? Am I weak? Am I failing? These questions are not just rhetorical. They feel existential. Social pressure leverages the deepest parts of identity to keep people trapped in cycles of compromise and self-denial. Psychologically, this creates a conflict between authentic desire and perceived obligation. You may recognize deep down that the relationship is harmful, yet the fear of societal judgment amplifies hesitation. You start to measure not your own happiness, but the perceptions of others. You weigh potential criticism more heavily than your own peace of mind. And in doing so, you lose touch with your personal authority, the inner compass that knows what is B. S for you. Philosophically, this teaches a critical lesson about freedom and authenticity. Life is not about living according to the expectations of others. It is about honoring your own truth. The courage to leave a relationship that diminishes you is also the courage to reclaim your identity, to declare that your worth is not contingent on approval, that your life will be guided by values and choices aligned with your well-being. Social pressure may whisper, you should stay, but your own voice, when heard clearly, will say, I deserve love that uplifts me, and I am brave enough to seek it. Breaking free from social pressure is not easy. It requires self-awareness, reflection, and often the willingness to face temporary discomfort, awkward conversations, or disapproval. But the alternative, staying to satisfy the expectations of others, is far costlier. It is a life half lived, dictated by fear, guilt, and obligation, rather than courage, joy, and authenticity. So if you feel the invisible hands of society, family, or friends holding you back, remember this. Your life belongs to you, and your happiness is your responsibility. True strength lies not in appeasing the world, but in honoring your own truth. Step forward with confidence, knowing that living authentically is not only a gift to yourself, it is the truest form of respect for everyone you encounter. You do not owe anyone a life that compromises your worth, and by choosing freedom over expectation, you create a life that is fully, unapologetically yours. So now, let's take a moment and reflect on everything we've explored together. Why do good people stay in bad relationships? Fear of being alone, hope for change, the weight of emotional investment and history, self-sacrifice and over-responsibility, struggles with self-worth and the need for validation, and the invisible pressures of society and identity. All of these forces of society and identity, all of these forces conspire to keep us trapped. And yet, knowing them is not enough. Understanding them is not enough. The transformation comes when we choose to act in spite of them. Here's the truth. None of these forces are inherently weaknesses. They are deeply human responses to vulnerability, to connection, to love. But when they are left unchecked, they become chains, holding you in a life that diminishes your spirit, compromises your self-respect, and clouds your potential for real joy. Each of these reasons, each story your mind tells you to justify staying, is really an invitation to reclaim your power, to step into self-awareness, and to honor your own needs, your own worth, your own voice, your own voice. Imagine a life where fear does not dictate your decisions. Imagine releasing hope that blinds you and embracing clarity that guides you. Imagine letting go of histories that no longer serve you and reclaiming the energy you've invested in someone else's unwillingness to grow. Imagine stepping back from the compulsion to over-sacrifice and realizing that your love is most powerful when it is balanced, reciprocal, and life-affirming. Imagine anchoring your value within yourself rather than in someone else's inconsistent approval. Imagine walking freely, unburdened by the invisible expectations of society, family, or friends, guided by your own truth and integrity. That life is not a fantasy. It is possible, and it begins the moment you decide that staying where you are is no longer the default. The moment you decide that your happiness, your growth, and your self-respect are non-negotiable. The moment you stand up, take a breath, and say, I am worthy. I am enough. I deserve love that lifts me, not diminishes me. And I will no longer settle for less. You see, leaving a bad relationship is not a failure. It is an act of courage, an act of self-respect, and an affirmation of your worth. Every fear you feel, every hope you struggle with, every history and expectation you carry, they are all part of the journey, but they do not define your destination. Your destination is freedom. Your destination is clarity. Your destination is a life where love and respect are not conditional, where joy is not negotiated, and where you are fully seen, fully honored, and fully alive. So go forward with courage. Honor yourself, embrace your power, and remember this: staying in pain out of fear, hope, obligation, or pressure is a choice, but so is leaving. And choosing yourself every single day is the most powerful, transformative act of love you can ever perform. You deserve it. And the world will only be better when you step fully into it,